Hello, good morning. My name is António Ferreira. I come from a cloud service provider called Lunacloud. You might see that on the title of my presentation I have Big Data and Cloud. This is because I know nothing about smart cities. I know nothing about machine-to-machine and nothing about Internet of Things. I know a little bit about big data and more about cloud, so that's what I'm going to talk about. But hopefully I will give you a view from an industry, from a service provider. Just one slide, one sentence. Lunacloud is a cloud infrastructure and platform service provider. We've got data centers now in 3 different countries, and we are opening our 4th data center in Russia this year, in September. We are starting our operations in July, but the data center will be ready in September. About the cloud, I think we all agree that the cloud is essentially a more efficient way of using IT resources. This is to set the scene of my next slides. High-end compute and storage resources are now available at the fingertip, and a whole new set of challenges can be solved or can be addressed with these resources more quickly and with lower costs. So instead of speaking about which services we provide, I will speak about 2 use cases of real customers that currently use our services. And those use cases would not be possible or would be a lot more expensive to implement or would take a lot more time if we were not speaking about cloud services. So the first use case is from a company in the IT research and analytics world, a company called Autoros. They've got offices in many places, in Silicon Valley, in Norway, Denmark, Switzerland, Belarus, South America. And they do essentially benchmarking. And they had one of the challenges they had is they wanted to do benchmarking of different NoSQL databases, Cassandra, MongoDB, Riot, Couchbase, etc. And they had to run performance tests on those databases in several different nodes. And their requirements was a huge 120 virtual machines or cloud servers, if you want, with a total of almost 1 terabyte of RAM and 1,000 CPU cores, and not that much storage, but essentially compute capacity. But they needed it only for 15 days. So go back 5 years, and this would be impossible to replicate unless a huge investment was made. And it would take at least 100,000 euros to buy this kind of resources. It would take probably 2 months to get these resources and to implement it in a data center, and those costs are not reflected in there. And now with cloud infrastructure services, this can be done within 1 day. The 120 virtual machines can be up and running, and for a cost for the 15 days of around of less than 10,000 euros. So this is something that would be impossible a few years ago, and sometimes we don't realize the amount of power we now have with cloud computing. Another use case of the same company is Hadoop benchmarking. So similar scenario. They wanted to test several Hadoop technologies. They are mentioned there. And in this case, they needed 250 virtual machines. So same kind of challenge, but with a higher one, with more resources needed. And in this case, still the same conclusions. Just buying the hardware for 25 days of operation would be totally impossible and would not be done without cloud infrastructure services. So what we see in these 2 examples is the concept of immediate availability of resources. So suddenly in 1 day I can have 250 virtual servers running and all controlled through a web interface, which was not possible some years ago. The concept of elasticity, I can deploy a few servers, set up my NoSQL databases, ramp this up to 120 servers for 15 days and then reduce again. So this elasticity brings a lot of flexibility to users. And the concept of pay-per-use, so I don't need to make an investment, I only pay for what I need to use. In the entertainment industry, another use case, the second one and the last one for this presentation, it's a social network for independent bands and musicians. So it's a customer that basically has a social network, a website in which independent musicians and bands can upload their own videos, their own musics, and basically share their profile and share their content with the rest of the world. So in this case, this is a startup. And as a startup, they wanted to build a social network, and they wanted to grow up to tens or hundreds of thousands of musicians, or even more, that will, by each own, upload tens or hundreds of musics and videos. And that's basically, in terms of storage capacity, that's not huge, but the flexibility of starting with one band, one music, up to growing up to tens of thousands of bands and videos and musics, this is where really the cloud makes a difference. This startup wouldn't be possible without a huge VC investment upfront, or by using cloud infrastructure technologies. They can deploy their application and basically start with very low operating costs. So again, the concept of elasticity growing from 1 to 2 to 3 and to 4, both on compute and storage resources. The on-demand self-service, in this case, there's not a human using the web interface to deploy servers. In this case, the use case is more about storage. It's about their application connecting through an API to provide storage. And the broad network access, this startup is present in 2 markets. One is Brazil and the other one is Portugal. They want to expand to different markets. So the fact that this kind of resources can be deployed in different data centers across the world is important for them. A little bit on big data and using our own example of NoSQL technologies that we use. We've got two of our services. One is called Cloud Storage. For those that know Amazon, Cloud Storage is equivalent to S3. So it's basically an object storage service. This is built over a NoSQL database called Cassandra. And another service that we have in which we use a completely different NoSQL technology, which is MongoDB. And basically this service is all about providing MongoDB as a service. MongoDB is becoming the most popular NoSQL database, the equivalent to MySQL in the relational world. So this is our own usage of NoSQL and technologies. So in terms of the future of the cloud, from our view, again, from a service provider view, we believe that IaaS, and that has been said before by Thomas, is a commodity. This is a utility service that we provide to customers. And this is something different from what Amazon, to take on the example, the usual example, is doing, is instead of 4 or 5 or 6 huge data centers, we believe in tens of smaller data centers closer to customers in many different countries, and especially with different geographical alternatives. So that's why we have data centers in Portugal, that's why we have data centers in France, that's why we are building now installing now in Russia. We are also exploring opportunities to open in Indonesia, in Colombia. So this is places where the big cloud infrastructure providers are not, and are not considering to be in at the moment. So we believe in a wider group of smaller data centers rather than a small group of big data centers. But again, this is a commodity. This is all about scale. This is all about providing the best price as a utility service. Then the differentiator comes, and that's why we're making the first steps as well in this areas, in the platform as a service. This is basically a service for developers. This drives innovation, and all the activity takes place, and that has been said before as well, in the applications world. Applications is what consumers see, all kinds of applications, and SaaS is basically the big chunk of the cloud computing industry at the moment, and will grow even further. So that's all for me. My contacts, if you want to speak to me later on. Otherwise, I will be open to questions later. Thank you.